I want to introduce you to a concept that philosophers and great thinkers have been talking about for centuries, and I'm going to call it above the line. But essentially what it's about is understanding that there is this line of intent that exists in our lives. And you kind of know whether you're above or below it, don't you? I mean, if I was to ask you in your health, your personal health, currently right now, how are you operating? Are you above or below the line? If I said from a wealth point of view, how are you operating right now? Are you above or are you below the line? Let's go into some key relationship in your life. If you went through an audit of all your relationships, how are they operating at the moment? Are they above or are they below the line? And here's the thing, you don't need me to determine where that line is, do you? Like you intuitively know whether you're operating above or below the line. So you can pretty much summarize that below the line, not good, above the line, good. Everyone cool? That's the operating game we're playing with. Now, we could go through Abraham Maslow and we could start to unpack his hierarchy of needs, and we could look for the physical or physiological needs right through to self-actualization. And it's an above the line conversation. We could talk about Don Beck and Claire Graves and their work in spiral dynamics, which has essentially been accredited for having a huge impact on apartheid in South Africa. Whether that's true or not, I love the story, and I love the idea that they have lines of behavior. You could talk about leadership evolution models. Synergistics International have the LSI model. There are so many versions of this. David Hawkins, if you're into kinesiology and the ontological conversation, he does it as well in his book Force versus Power. In fact, one of my dear friends, Michael Henderson, wrote a book called Above the Line, which was a tribute and was in honour of the late, great Dr. David Hawkins. So what I thought I'd do is just introduce, I guess, a condensed and what I hope is practical view of the above and below the line. At no point do I want to suggest that this is my material. Just like all of these videos, what I'm trying to do is open our minds to new ideas and share them. And if they're at all helpful and you can do anything with them, knock yourself out. So let's look at probably 6, let's do 3 below the line and 3 above the line, but you could slice this 1,000,000 times below and 1,000,000 times above, but it's not very accessible when you start going to that level of detail. I think probably the first place that we're operating at, if we're okay, but just sort of a bit below the line, is we operate from fear. And when we're operating from fear, what we're generally doing is we're going to withdraw from situations and people. And so the antidote for this fear thing is to actually push for the conflict, to actually connect or push for the conversation, to actually elicit the thing that you're afraid of. And we know that with phobia curing, this is critically important. I saw people who are experts in neuro-linguistic programming help cure someone supposedly who had a phobia of spiders. And basically what they did is they'd make the spider into a cartoon, they'd give it big boogly eyes, they'd make it sort of sepia toned, or they'd make it really close up or really far away, or microscopic into the hairs on the spider's legs. The idea being that they are connecting to the thing you're afraid of, not withdrawing. So if fear is your operating level at the moment, definitely below the line, then what you want to do is lean in, not run away. Yeah? Be a first responder, running into the burning building of what makes you afraid rather than disappearing. Anger is obviously what comes often next, and depending on different people's processes, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving, they might put these in different levels. But if we say fear is here and then anger is one level up, I think the trick about anger is you're basically separating yourself from others. So think about road rage, right? Have you ever been in one of those situations where you're ranting at someone in the car next to you only to realise you know them, and then you feel very sheepish for doing it? Whenever we're angry, we have firmly put ourselves into our own containment and we've pushed someone else into theirs. And if you were to write a list of the things that bug you, you know what I hate, what I really, really hate, and you listed things off. Like, for me, it's people who stack dishwashers incorrectly or microwaves that ding too much. These are a few of my least favourite things. Whenever I'm in that position of being really rejecting some situation or pushing judgment into other people, then what I'm generally doing is I'm in anger. So what you try and do, take responsibility for everything that's going on in your life and try and break down the walls between you and situations and you and other people. And I find the phrase "just like me" is incredibly helpful. So if someone does something that bugs me, I go, yeah, just like me, I remember when I did that. And what it helps is it just brings me closer and less separate. All right, now this Third one's a little bit weird. This one's right on the tipping point of the line, right? So there's always a debate around whether you can put pride below or above the line. It is very clearly below the line in my worldview and in all of the documentation of the great philosophers and thinkers around this idea of line theory. I just made that up, but it sounded good. Then anytime you are in deep pride, you're kind of possessing someone else's success. So I'm either proud of myself, and then that becomes an ego piece, or I'm proud of you, and that can sometimes become condescending and possessive. Now, this is right at the point where people want to disagree, and I go, whatevs. What I'm interested about is the quality of humility, which is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And it's a really important introduction point to then tipping a situation that is below the line above. Now remember, this is not a general label for the whole of your life. It's compartments of your life quite often go below the line. And if you had enough compartments of life below the line, then yeah, you'd say my life is below the line or it sucks right now. So humility is the key to pride, and it's essentially about focus on gratitude for others. And if you just simply spend less time thinking about yourself and more time thinking about others, that's great. Now I know from a depression point of view, sometimes you got to just be grateful for the smallest, stupidest things. You know, yeah, my coffee was warm this morning, and you go, great. There are people who'd be lucky to, you know, even consider having coffee. Okay, so this is very much a privileged conversation. When we get to above the line, it's essentially around courage, it's around acceptance, and it's around love. I'll go through them because I think you get these. Courage is the ability, and I think Dr. Brené Brown is the leading expert on this in her books Daring Greatly, and she's a shame researcher who does extraordinary work in this space, is to have a look at this idea of the moment where you get out of your comfort zones, you do that thing that makes you, challenges you a little bit, and this could be your ignorance. I mean, I'm a white 50-year-old male who's grown up in absolute privilege, and understanding just some of the movements that are happening on the planet right now have been wonderfully confronting for my cognitive bias and my unconscious bias. So just look into this idea of having the courage to go to places that stress you out just a little bit. When you get into acceptance, this is almost like the opposite of anger, right? Can you see how it marries as the second rung above the line? And this is about, you know, probably approaching every situation with compassion, which leads me then into one of the greatest forms of compassion is love. For me, the question, what would love do, is how you move through the 5th into the 6th level. So if you're disappointed in somebody, you can accept what has happened, the situation and the condition, and you can say, what would love do right now? How would love write this text? How would love write this email? How would I respond to this disappointment in world, life, or situation? And ultimately, I think there's this Buddhist saying that Buddha said that love is the recognition of self in others and delight in the discovery. And I think there's something super powerfully affirming for yourself when you express love. And so it's about kindness, it's about compassion, it's about consideration, and it's about dignity for me. And if you can bring those qualities in response to the question, what would love do, you'll start to operate at the highest level above the line. Once again, none of this is my stuff. It's simply a little bit of a literature review that I've aggregated, curated, and shoved together a little bit in a way to hope make sense. All of this information is just simply a model. It's a model that helps you see the world and maybe have a little bit of agency where you start to operate in the best version of you. Because what I fundamentally believe, and what all of these videos are about, is that you lead best when the best version of you talks to the best version of us.